Thanks for tuning in to Causes That Matter. I'm your host, Dr. Tico Hardy, licensed clinical social worker, and we're going to dig deeper into issues pertaining to social justice, such as race, religion, politics, and so much more. I'm passionate about having courageous conversations in a civilized manner. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Hardy, your host for Causes That Matter, and I'm really excited today about my special guest, Dr. MelindaJoy Mingo. And so our topic today is going to be women of color in higher education, and we are going to come from multiple perspectives. And we want to tell you what our experiences have been. So before I start telling you what made me excited about this topic, I'm going to ask Dr. MelindaJoy Mingo to introduce herself.
Well, okay. So good morning. Well, I was going to say good morning. Just hello, everyone. So I guess, I don't know, to introduce myself, I'm a professor. I teach here in the U.S. I teach globally as well. I teach in Vietnam, and I also teach for Melbourne University in Australia. So I do a lot of global teaching, but also here in the U.S. And then as far as for what we will talk about today, I'm also an executive coach.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mingo, for sharing that. I do have a couple questions that we're going to get to a little bit later, but I wanted to tell you why this particular topic was on my heart. And so,
Yes.
as I said previously, I am a former CDO, Chief Diversity Officer. And what I realized during my little over 2 years in that role is that I felt like, as a woman of color, I was just being treated differently. And that's when I came across this article. It's actually a newsletter that's produced by John Hopkins, and it was in 2019, and they were talking about tone policing. So I'm going to read you the definition of tone policing, and then I'm going to tell you the name of that particular article. So tone policing, for our purposes today, is the practice of dismissing the substance of a person's message by criticizing the emotional delivery, often to silence marginalized voices such as women and people of color who were seen as expressing themselves too emotionally. So, in short terms, what that really means is that some of the experiences I have had as a woman of color, particularly in higher education, if I start raising my voice, I'm naturally loud. People would say, are you okay? Are you angry? Are you mad? And so I would get that angry Black woman. But when my colleague that was white would talk and kind of get riled up, they would say that they were passionate. And so one day I asked somebody, why am I angry, perceived as angry, and then my colleague is perceived as passionate? And so that kind of sent me on this journey of saying there's a difference here, and it's significantly different. And so the article on tone policing, they actually called it's how tone policing legitimizes injustice. And so that's a little bit of what I will be weighing in. I'm going to let Dr. Mingo have the mic. She has amazing background that I just don't see a lot of people with, at least not in my circles of influence. So, Dr. Mingo, I'm going to start off with the very first question here. Why is your why? What is your reason for being in higher education, and what encourages you about what you get to do?
Alrighty. So it's so funny because I never set out with all of the degrees that I pursued. I never set out to even be in higher ed. It wasn't anything I wanted to do. I have a medical background, and so I started out working as a medical assistant for orthopedic doctors, surgeons. So that was my love. And at some point, I just began to think, I really want to teach people about culture, about global things, and I'm not going to really be able to do that, working for an orthopedic surgeon. It was a great experience. And so my first teaching experience, I think it was probably in 2005. I applied to teach business psychology at one of those career colleges, the ones where you can go and get your certificate in maybe a year and a half.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, I thought, I really love this. I've always, seen myself as a coach or teacher. Even when I was 13, I grew up in inner city Chicago, and I grew up in a project, uh, named Cabrini Green. So, that many people can resonate with that.
Yeah.
But so in the midst of that, though, when I was 13, I started this leadership club in the back of my alley, and for little kids, and I would invite them all in. I would say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? They're like, later, you're an old woman. You're 13 years old. We don't know. We're only 8. And so I was like, you need to tell me something. You're not going to get any candy or anything. So I was teaching kids, even when I was young myself, that there is something more to your life, a purpose beyond what you see. And so anyway, that translated to me my first teaching job. But what I will say, what was so surprising to me is that my why is because I love not just to impart knowledge. It's not just knowledge. I love to see people honestly get what they need to do what they want to do in life and reach their potential. But my my understanding of education, period. I know we're talking about higher ed, but my understanding of that was really interestingly shattered a little bit when I started working at this place in Colorado, in Denver, and one of my students, an adult learner, um, didn't get the grade that he wanted, so he came to school with a weapon,
Wow.
and I didn't know that he had a weapon. But some people found out about it, and they ran to me to tell me that somebody said they're going to shoot you. Now, maybe back in the whatever decades, if someone would say that, you'd go, well, okay, yeah. But now, if someone poses a threat to you, you have to take that seriously. So that was
Absolutely.
my first encounter with what I call I mean, my why is still there, was still there, but I also understood that my why was going to encompass a lot of what, if I can say that. And what I mean is that higher ed, adult learners, it's a unique place to be, is how I'm going to say that. I'll just answer that and wait for your next questions.
Yeah, and you know what I was thinking about, Dr. Mingo, that was my experience when I first started was I felt like I would go to class and there would be opposition. So if I had older white males, they would challenge every grade, they would challenge every comment. And then I would hear colleagues just seem like they were just pushing back and I just didn't feel supported. And I say all that to say that I would come home calling my friends, and I have several women of color in higher education with doctorate degrees. And I would call them and say, I don't know if I can make it another day. Everywhere I go, every time it's a student complaining, but it's only the students in my situation that were students that weren't students of color. So that leads me to the next question that I want to ask you. So when you think about it from your perspective, what motivates you and what assumptions do you think people make of women of color?
Yeah, I'm just motivated that, again, no matter what a person's color is, I just want to put that out here. That honestly, for me, yes, I do want our brown and wonderful color, caramel colored, adults and students. My mission, though, is a little bit bigger than that. And my mission is for all people to be able to learn from me, too. Because when I can bring into the classroom all the academic knowledge and understanding, I do think, though, it's time for people to learn from people of color. And so people, no matter who they are, we've been in many rooms, in many spaces. We show up ready to give our time, to give whatever. But a lot of times we're not the voices that are up front. We're the voices that are we're the faces in a room. So, sometimes people can say we have Dr. Mingo in the room. We have Dr. Hardy in the room. And so for me, over the years, what I've discovered is that I know that I, studied readied myself for what I do, the PhD that I have in global education and leadership. But so many times what I'm finding in classrooms, especially academia, is that there's somehow not the same value. And I've been wondering about that. I'm like, why is it that I can walk into a room, or be setting up my classroom? For instance, I was setting up my classroom in a university setting, and a student came in, and I'm behind all the monitor and everything. And the student asked me, "So do you know when the professor is coming in here?" And I'm just thinking, is he trying to kid or what? I said, um, I think I know because I am the professor. So I think I know exactly when the professor. But what I want to say is that, to go back to something you said about our voices. So voice to me is not just, I understand the tone, but what I realize is some people don't want certain voices. They don't. You can show up all you want, but sometimes they don't want certain voices, and especially voices of experience. And Dr. Hardy, here's something that I want to say. We're talking about academia now, but it's everywhere. No matter where you go, when we look at culture and we look at heritage, that Black women were always told, "You're too much. Cover your hair. You're too much. We don't like your hair texture. You're too much." So then we've got images on the front of pancake syrup with Aunt Jemima with things on her head, and she's a creator. We have inventors, we'll just say Black women, African American women, but they're unknown. And it took years. Just think of Hidden Figures. It took years when the movie came out for people to realize that there was an African American woman behind NASA and the success of all that. So academia is one thing, but I really think in our culture, period, that it's kind of like the policing of the personality of who we are. And I just really believe that, you know, our tone, or you sounding like you're so, calm it down, and it's like, that's who I am. And, and what happens is there's a term, it's called assumed familiarity. Assumed familiarity is how people assume, because they look at stereotypes. Stereotypes is listening to labels. Listening types of labels. So the label is that you can acquire all the knowledge and understanding, but you're still not enough. There's still
Mm,
more things to do to acclimate into the culture, to really be embraced, for what you have to bring into that environment. And so then what people do is, I'll just say, for Black women, I know African American women who are doing really well in academia, and all. And one of the things we've talked about is academic bullies. And so the trend of something that I'm seeing over the years is that you walk into a classroom and the students from whatever age on up, I mean, they're just totally disrespectful, dishonoring. They're bullies. You walk into them, they talk to you any kind of way, or whatever that may be. It's not healthy discourse, because in academia we really encourage critical thinking and academic discourse, so that when we're lecturing or whatever we're doing, we want our adult learners to be able to challenge the process. But for me, I see people challenging the personality and not the process. And so
mm,
so that's the difference. But what happens along the way is that you find people who now are just saying, I walk into a classroom, I can't say this. We have, in any form, whether in academia or high school or wherever, you've got evaluations, and evaluations are good. But what happens with those is that if someone doesn't like you, they're all anonymous. They can say anything about you. And so I personally have had to really think through my why. I'm glad you asked me that, because I love what I do, but it's very intense to walk into a setting where you're critiqued as soon as you walk in the door. You walk into a setting, and your sometimes credentials get you in the door, but they don't get you to a place of understanding your value and worth.
Well, you better
Because
say that. Say that again.
yeah, because they can get you in the door, but it's what happens inside the door. And I teach a lot of, I call it cultural capacity training. So I do a lot of teaching in cultural capacity. And one of the things that I share is that so many people are always checking their identity. Like you check your coat valet or car for valet parking. There's people who really, they're not themselves. I mean, just think. So of all the professional women, black women who, I mean, even people who are news reporters or whatever, it was for a time that you couldn't wear your hair. It had to be a certain type or style. It had to be straight, and so if it had any kind of curl or kinkiness to it, you just weren't appropriate. And so then we had to come up with an actual act. The Dove Company
The
came
crown.
Crown Act so that we could wear our hair, an act that prohibits people from discriminating against us because of our hair. We have to have an entire act.
And you know what's interesting? I think people, even though I face a lot of opposition, we're always still the one. I think is intense for me because you're always putting out. You're always trying to make sure you don't step on eggshells. You're always trying to make sure you're the mediator and you're the person. And so you take an awful lot on just to not even be yourself. So I was telling to somebody, this has been a while ago, and they were like, well, and this is, I served as a senior executive level, and they were just talking about, well, everybody has a code switch. And I said, people say code switch, but I said, I'm going to write an article on code strip because I feel like I don't even switch anymore. I'm being stripped of my entire identity, right? Got to watch my voice. Got to make sure what I wear is right. Got to make sure that I look the part. And you do all of that work to get to the table, right? That you can really help make it influence. And then the very people at the table won't even hear you out. And so when I start thinking about sometimes things being intense, I feel like we have a right to be frustrated. We don't now, I'm not going to say carry it out in a way that's not healthy, but we are carrying a lot of internal baggage that I have never heard of my white colleagues say that they are up against. And so I agree with you on this, checking your identity at the door, which leads me to my next question for you. What are some of the challenges that you see in higher education settings and across the globe for women of color? And so we'll talk more at the end, but Dr. Mingo has a book that you can get. Dr. Mingo has a TEDx that you can log on to or listen to, and we'll have all that at the bottom of the podcast for you. But what do you see are the challenges?
Yeah, well, I'll say that, and I want to re-rope it around, and I want to say this, that I also see people who really honor Black women who are in higher ed. We just don't see it enough because I see that. Then I'll talk about the challenges because all of my experiences in higher ed, if I may say that, they haven't been bad experiences, all of them. They've been tough. Some of them have been really tough.
That's
But I
good.
have people who really have supported me, and I want to say that. And so I want to add this, and then I'll go to the challenge part. But I teach in Vietnam in higher ed, and I teach at Hanoi University, International University, and I also teach in Ho Chi Minh City at the International School of Business. So what's so interesting, Dr. Hardy, is that when I step off a plane in Vietnam, and I've been teaching over there about 10 years now, you would think a rock star had just landed in Vietnam. Seriously. I mean, even if I arrive at 12 midnight, the deans of the school, wherever I'm going to teach, they're out there, students, they've got flowers waiting, all of that. And so my experience in Vietnam has been very interesting, when I parallel them to here, because there's so much honor there. And so as a professor teaching overseas, the students are just, I mean, when I walk in, I can't remember any classrooms that I've walked into where students don't clap. I mean, this is for years where they don't clap and they're all excited. And so some people say to me, well, Dr. Mingo, that's because you're in Asia. And I go, no, no, not just that. I mean, because everybody's
I was
not.
literally about to actually ask you, do you think, sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Mingo. So since you're touching on this, I was going to ask you, do you think because in not exact, but they're also considered people of color in certain, like when they come here, or I hate the word minority, so I don't like using that. But do
Yeah.
you think any of that has to do with it? They understand we're speaking similar language, or
Yeah, I
no?
do. It's no, yeah, that is a part of it. They understand the struggle, to be
Yes.
honest. They do. And so they're very honoring. And here's the thing, in Vietnam, women in higher ed are honored so much. I mean, there's universities and colleges you can go to throughout Vietnam, and you have deans, you have chancellors. So women have a different role there. So I just want to say that then when I come back to the United States and I'm in a university here, it's just the whole um again, it's the whole process of walking into a classroom, and not everybody, again, I can't even say that. I mean, but we're walking into spaces where people just don't have the same value. It's just again, you walk through that. And so some of my challenges are with colleagues, not with students. My challenges are with colleagues who are not very engaging, who have their own, stereotypes about people of color, period, women, whatever. But some of them don't even speak. They're not even nice or whatever. So that's one. There's a challenge of I'll say for me, the challenging opportunity. Let me add that. The
All
challenging
right.
challenging opportunity of what I teach. I teach interpersonal communications, business communications. I'm a law professor. I teach employment law, and that could be anything from ADA to whatever across the board. And I'm a business professor. So all of these things, these different genres that I teach, what I started doing, Dr. Hardy, is bringing myself fully into the classroom. If people don't want that, then they don't want that class. I've stopped pulling
Mhm.
back and not sharing experiences because a lot of things that I teach, I have some learned experiences that go along with it. I can't teach about culture and don't talk about some things that I've experienced. I've just become a bolder person. People can call it what they want, but I'm like, there has to be actual experiences that I bring. Otherwise, I'm just showing up. You know what I mean? I'm just showing up and giving them textbook learning. But again, I just, made up my mind that I'm going to be fully me when I walk into a classroom. And it's so
No, that's
funny.
right.
Yeah, because there's the whole piece of I'm not going to be miserable. Okay. You
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. And I will tell you, I think for me, I gave so much of myself up because I fought so long to get to certain tables. I tell people when I went to school, with an associate's degree, I had never read a chapter book. And I'm not that old. And when you think about all the hoops, like you talked about the different genres, well, I have the ones of struggle. I teach criminal justice, psychology, social work, right? All of
yeah.
those things. And even in my own industry, people don't tend to value you. Everybody said, "Oh, Tico, once you go to school, if you get some education, oh my God, it'll be so amazing as a woman of color." And then when I did it, I'm still facing opposition, right? I'm still the person people like Tico, but they don't like Dr. Hardy,
Mm,
right? So as long as I show up as Tico and stay in a certain space, people like me. But when I show up as Dr. Hardy, all of a sudden people kind of want to, it's a little more intense. And so those are the challenges, just to your point about with colleagues, that and again, I'm not saying no other group is not experiencing this, but for the purpose of what we're talking about is women of color specifically. And that's why one of the things I also added on this is, where are the allies? I have all these people who say that they're allies. And then when you need them, they become silent. And so that is another challenge for me, that when we were behind closed doors, you was like, oh, that's so wrong the way they treat you. And that person disrespected you in that meeting. And I'm like, well, why didn't you step up? Right? Why? So people will tell us what they're bothered by, but then won't show up when we need somebody to challenge that voice. So those are some things that I'm not miserable, but they have been very impactful, more so the last couple of years than I've ever felt them. So yeah,
Why do
so
you Well, why do you think you give up your, like you said, sometimes you give up your identity? Why do you think for you? Because in a way, it almost seems like they would want the Dr. Hardy, because people can kind of connect to that, the academics, the degrees that you've acquired instead of the Tico. I
well,
just find that interesting. Yeah.
they want the Dr. Hardy in the community, right? They want the Dr. Hardy when I'm being asked to speak, right? Or to teach, or at a big luncheon. They love that piece of Dr. Hardy, because then you can say you have this pretty articulate
So,
woman of color who come from the struggle. I told them I come from the struggle. Anything you could think of happened. But what's interesting, to your point, is coming from that struggle, you would think that people would want to hear from me. You would
yeah.
think that they wanted to hear that lived experience. And so I feel like they want Dr. Hardy when it's a promotion to a specific cause, a specific industry, a specific job. That's when I see that person. That's the one they want then. But when I just go behind closed doors and say, look, this isn't feeling good, right? There are people making racist comments. There are people, I talked about one time, literally microaggression after microaggression after microaggression in meetings. And so when I start saying that piece, then they say, well, I think you misunderstood. I know that person. I've been working with that person for a very long time, and they did not mean it like they did. But I'm like, well, I don't know what other way to take it. Right. And so anyway, so I wish I gave up my identity, which again, I don't advise this, because there was a heavy price I paid for doing that. I thought I was being a peacemaker. I thought if I come from a place of neutrality, then now I can get all these people to see, number one, I deserve to be here. And number two, I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to hear them out. And then slowly, 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 all of that start disappearing. And I found myself making myself small and really elevating them. And so, yeah, so I that was probably one of the things, because I'm very vocal on social justice, that I feel like has been muzzled for the last couple years. So
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Yeah. I
go ahead.
just, for me, on the other hand, I just made a commitment that I won't give up my identity. And
Mm,
because to do that you don't get to bring the fullness of who you are. And I understand what you're saying, but I just have come to a point that I'm not going to give up my identity. When I'm in Vietnam, I don't give it up. When I'm here in America, I don't give it up, and yeah, there's the challenges for all of that. But like you said, what happens sometimes is that I heard someone say this, that we're always trying to edit our identity, uh,
yeah.
to fit in where, we already fit in. Always trying to, like we take a document and edit stuff.
And
Yeah.
nobody wants to not show up as their self.
Yeah.
I thought, so it's one thing to put stuff on hold, right? I told people I didn't plan to be in any of these positions. I thought, okay, I'll get the bachelor's degree, I'll get a job, I'll get the master's degree, I'll get more money. And then over time, I said, well, if I get this doctorate, maybe it'll put me at that table, because I know people from my old community, Cabrini Greens, Robert Taylor, they're not going to go through everything, not everybody, to get to the table. And I did. And because I did that, I assumed that I would be respected. I assumed that I can show up as all of me. And so when I started trying to show up as Tico, that person, Dr. Hart, they didn't want that person. And I paid a heavy cost for that. And sometimes people say, well, hey, would you do things different? And I'm like, yeah, because right, we need our jobs. We talked about with my last guest, 2,300 diversity officer, equity officers that lost their job. And so that's the scary thing. You don't want to give up who you are, but you want to stay where you are. Number one, I spoke up for people of color. You know, I was able to weigh in on some of those conversations. And I thought if I continue to fit in, then they'll hear more about my ideals of how to kind of change stuff and things of that nature. But it didn't happen that way, which brings me to this next question. And then I'm going to kind of leave it up for you. We'll do a brief summary. What solutions do you see that we need to put in place? And then what is our role in that? What do you see your role as far as being solution oriented?
Yeah, I love the question. So I just will say solutions are, it's interesting. I think first of all, the problems are going to look different for different people. Honestly, there's not one thing that's the same for everybody. You know, we understand that. And so for the sake of today, the conversation, I don't know if there's a one solution, but I do believe it's, we have to still, and I say this, you know, we have to show up. That's just it. And we have to be willing. I heard a great quote, and it says there's no comfort when we're in a place of growth, and no growth if we choose to remain in a place of comfort. And so academia has never really been comfortable for me, to be honest. No, I've felt many times discarded, just devalued. But I will say I haven't felt that all the time. So I have to put that out there. I've been honored, you know, I've been honored in academia. I've had white colleagues who have been allies for me as well. Not everybody has come. So I have to be honest with that. What I had to come, what I had to come to grips with though is that no matter what I do in academia, there's going to be people who don't like me just because they don't even know me. There's going to be all these classrooms where, um, you have to almost try to manage personalities and all that. And so it's just a lot. But I continue to remember my why. And the solution is that I ask myself, am I the solution by showing up and doing what I went to school to do to help people really reach their purpose in life, wherever it may be? Because I teach it. I mean, you know this, Dr. Hardy. I teach in traditional academic settings, but I also was, my colleague and I started a program in Denver, and we got a grant for people who have really been just kind of discarded, like unemployed, homeless, ex-gang members, and et cetera. We started a program where they could get skills-based training and go into the green jobs construction industry. So I think some solutions are, what is it that we need to create ourselves so that when we bring people in, those people are valued and they have honor, that when we look at, our Black voices and instructors and women, especially as we're talking today, you know, what women can we bring into some settings if we create something? It's not always easy to create, you know, something it takes a lot for that. It does. But I just been thinking about that, and I'm like, you know, how have I been a solution in higher ed? You know, and I've had to really think through that through all of the years of teaching at many universities. I was literally put off the campus years ago at a university because I stood up and I said to the professor, um, in the class, when I was a student, I said, you know, that comment is very disrespectful for, people of color in this class. And he said, well, you don't challenge me like that. I was like, okay, it's my last class, so it doesn't matter. I'm just saying it's unprofessional. That person failed me, it took a whole year for me to petition to get my degree, an undergraduate degree, because I stood up for something that other people were going through. And so I was like, I can't even believe that. And so at some point, that should have taken me totally out of higher ed. It should have taken me out of the college setting. I was so disappointed with that, Dr. Hardy. I really was. But then I felt what it did. Instead of sweeping me away, it kind of anchored my feet more. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm school to do what I want to do. And so you don't get to reposition me because of your assumptions, because of your stereotypes, because of your biases, because of any of that. You don't get to reposition me from what I know that I can do and that I can do well. You just don't. You
No,
don't.
that's right. Well, I
So
say because I'm shaking my head in agreement. I had when I was in my doctorate program, there was a professor, and you were going to have them. It was for one of our assessment, diagnoses, psychopathology, one of those courses. And I was saying something, and you know how we always say the ask. ASK. And
yes.
I was pronouncing it more like axe,
Oh,
AXE, right?
yeah.
And so I'm thinking nothing of it. And he said, in front of the students, he said, Tico, I want to tell you, I hear that you say you're from this background, but I'm here to make you a
Uh,
doctor. And so that hood or that ghetto, Tico, you really need to work on trying to pronounce your words better. And so when I say it took every ounce within me, everything that I had, but I had to pick my battle. This was going to be somebody. And so I surprised because even my white colleagues was like, what? Did he just do that? And so he did it. Afterwards, I said, so I would like to talk to you. You made a comment, and I apologize if I'm not speaking in the vernacular that makes more sense for you. I said, but my journey has been me. I said, I don't have anybody when I get home to read over a 25-page paper. I can't call anybody on the phone and ask them what they do, and what they don't do, or so forth and so on. So I am here to learn. And then I said, how about you mentor me? Would you like to mentor me? And people are like, "What? Yeah, I really would like you to mentor me because you're saying I'm missing something that I don't have the community to get. Do you want to teach it to me?" And so, I had to think about that, and I had to think that I had another year to go, and that they were going to be my instructor for 2 or 3 more classes. So, again, that's that. It should stop you, but actually, for me, it highlighted how he saw me. And he told me, he said, people, with your personality and with your background don't generally go pursue a doctorate, right? And so when we're having these conversations, at the end of the day, I'm a human being. My feelings get hurt just like anybody else's.
yeah,
And
it did.
sometimes we are taking on more than
Hmm.
we should be having to take on to do more. So not only are we taking more from people, then we're doing more. We're showing up. We're there longer. I come to class early. I leave late, all the things. And so anyway, so I
Yeah,
think, that part of being a solution has to really be, whether it's higher ed or whoever, acknowledging that you're a part of the problem. And until we can get people to say, you know what, I'm part of the problem,
that's
because if
good.
you can identify that, right, then we
That's
can work with that. But
well.
if you still don't think you're part of the problem, that's where it gets problematic, if that makes sense. Go ahead, Dr. Mingo.
No, that's really good. I agree with that because I'm just to a place. I think the one thing about experiences, I tell people you can't take a person's learned experience from them and lived experience. You cannot. I'm like, you can take their peanuts and their wallet, but you can't take my lived experiences from me. And the thing that keeps me going, that was really good, what you said, great, what you said. The thing that keeps me going is I start thinking about the students that I meet along the way and that I get a chance to really speak into their lives and that somehow sometimes they come back and say, oh, Dr. Mingo, if you can do it, I can. I share my story with my students of how I started working on my bachelor's degree when I was in a homeless shelter. That I was homeless in Gary, Indiana, and I got a pass so that I could go out of the shelter, Dr. Hardy. I mean, you know, understand, and go out and start taking classes late at night at Indiana University and coming back there. And I tell them that, and then, you know, I share with them about my journey. I'm like, you know, I'm not sharing that I'm the only person who was in a shelter working on a bachelor's degree, but I said, I'm leading up to something that when I got my master's degree, I had to press through that, you know, after the death of my husband, the first semester that I started my master's degree. Then I go on to my PhD, and I'm like, okay, so now I have a PhD. I have two actually, one in global education and leadership and the other in urban city transformation. And I said, so let me tell you about that journey. So because of my journeys, what I won't do is let someone try to pull me from the journeys that I've been through because of their assumptions, their prejudices, their desire to try to dominate, you know, in situations where they shouldn't. I'm learning strategies, and the solution and strategy is, it's like what you said. I am not just going to show up. I'm showing up because I'm supposed to be there. And that when I decide that I don't want to be there, I'll leave. That's just it. And if I'm at a place or wherever it may be and it's not good for me, I'm just not going to continue to stay at a place where I'm devalued. Oh, can I tell you this? You will like this here. That in the 1800s, Dr. Hardy, people thought that, you know, we talk about the American gold rush. So by all rights, the American gold rush was 1800s, but in 1799 or 1779, there was a young boy, he was 12, and his name was Leon. And so Leon thought he had a big old rock. He and his dad were camping somewhere, and he took that rock and home, 17 pounds, and put it in his bedroom as a door stopper. And then his father said, let's go see what that really is. And when they took it in, they found out that it was gold. And so they didn't know, but this little 12-year-old boy had been using a piece of gold as a door stopper. And so what happens in life is that sometimes people don't understand the value and worth and the price that's been paid. You know, Black women have always had a journey. We're talking about academia here, but it's across the board. It doesn't matter. Wherever you go, there's that journey. And that's why I feel one of the solutions is we have to have a personal identity reset. And part of
Come
that
on.
identity reset is we've got to know who we are, because in the midst of all this here, there's a Dr. Tico Hardy that needs to be out here. There's a Dr. Tico Hardy that needs to be wherever you are. And for all those people who can't accept that, you move throughout this earth, Dr. Hardy, bringing the excellence that you bring. And you're bringing it in places where you're not a doorstop. You're bringing in
All
places
right.
where you identify this goal. So the solution is, first of all, I reset my identity. And I'm
Come
like,
on.
you don't get to define who I am or where I've been or any of that. You weren't with me when I was in a shelter trying to study. So
They,
from GED to PhD, from homeless shelter to PhD. And
come on
so
now.
that's what I want to
But
say.
it's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the reason I went through all this stuff. I told somebody, okay, so you want me to pronounce a word a certain way, you want me to do this. Let me give you $20 and tell
Okay.
you how you're gonna feed two kids for a week. So don't underestimate. And I would do trainings in the community where I'd say, hey, this is all the money you got
Woo,
and you
yes.
need to make it work. And guess what? Not only do you need 3 meals a day, them 2 snacks that you talk about kids should get, I need you to do all that too. And figure and let me know what your team plan is to make sure your kids eat, right? And
So
so
good.
that value, you can't quantify
Yeah,
that
you
lived
really.
experience. You
Mm-mm.
just can't quantify it. So here I
Mm-mm.
am trying to show up in these areas and say, we can both do this. You can have your say. I told this to a white male not too long ago to ask me a question about being a part of the solution. And I may have said this in the last podcast. And I said, look, you can be a part of the solution, but you can't lead the solution. Right. So we can talk, we can have discussions about what should be done. And then you should be willing to step back and let me lead. that solution, because it's for, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times you get the ideals and people, use them as their own. And so, yeah, so I think that's very good about that. How can we work jointly together? And this brings me to my last question for you. And then I'm going to have you summarize any last words that you want the audience to know. And I'll do the same. And then what we'll do is make sure they have access to your information in the podcast summary. So here's another thing. And I know we don't have time to talk about it today, but I am going to go there about your faith. And oftentimes you will hear people of color talking about, I just thank God for this. I praise God. He got me here. He put me here. And so you're there because you feel like you're on mission, right? So now you get Dr. Tico, and Sister Tico, right? So you get them all. And
Yes.
so down the road, we're going to talk about how is it that it feels like I can't show up as myself from my hair standpoint. My clothes got to be on point, shoes got to be on point, and now I can't even say praise the Lord without this being this big issue. So tell me a little bit about we're both women of faith and the intersection of that for you.
Yes, I love that. So for me, I don't believe that I would even probably still be, a professor and teaching in higher ed, if not for my faith. People know that I believe in God and that sustains me. And I keep thinking about Martin Luther King. We use his quotes a lot. And one that really still stands out to me is that you don't have to see the entire staircase to take the first step. And I said, so many people really rally around Martin Luther King, but would he be, if he was living now in this age that we're living in, this time, what would his experiences really be like? Because he was an educator, and a motivator, but he was a man of faith. And
Yes.
that was huge. Every rally that he led, everything for economic security and justice, he was still a man of faith. And so I just believe that for me, it's huge. I unashamedly, share that I'm a woman of faith and that even my students, I mean, I'm not in the classroom bringing Bibles and stuff, but I, but they do know that if they need prayer, they can come to me. My students, because when they Google you and your name, a lot of things come up that I've done in the faith world. So, like they call it that. So one of my students said to me, said, Dr. Mingo, we Googled your name and we're trying to figure out, what you doing up in here. I said, I'm a professor. That's what I'm doing up in here. Also get to live out my faith. And my faith means that I can love you when you don't love me back, that I've learned how to walk through difficult situations. I see college as a mission field where I can also bring something unique. And if I didn't see it, if I only saw it as a classroom where I could teach employment law and culture, I would miss out. So I would just say lastly that my faith is important to me. I even started a Bible club on campus, one of the campuses. So the intersection of that is the strength that I need when someone comes up to me and says, please articulate your words, Dr. Mingo, when you're talking. So when they come and say all these painful things, I can walk away and just say, okay, this is my mission field.
Yeah, that's interesting when you say that. I remember as I share my story, I don't represent every Black woman that grew up in the projects from poverty, and have suffered significant, right, journeys. I don't represent everybody from that particular point. I said, but what I do know is that at the end of the day, they would ask me in my world of social work to tell us about your resiliency, right? You're resilient. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I didn't even know how to spell that a few years ago, let alone tell you what it is. And I said, no, I said, it was God. And they were like, no, but there is no but. I said, I didn't have the wherewithal to
That's
know
right.
what the next move was. I
That's right.
didn't. And so then now you have this piece. I'm like, and I'm very grateful for the people who have showed up for us and who have stood up for us. Keep doing that. We need your voices. And I have friends that have done that. and have literally sent me, I am so sorry that you're being treated the way that you're being treated. And I've had a couple of people follow up on that. And that means a lot too. And so anyway, so yeah, so that faith piece is why that's why we're able to hold our peace some days. Cause I'm like, I've been said this, and then you show up at church, one prayer, and then I'm right there in the front row after I just went, so just, went off on you. So I had to start thinking about that. Make sure that you're in alignment, with what you're teaching. And so anyway, and what you're demonstrating people to, what you want them to see and what you want them to know about you. So with that being said, are there any last words, concluding? Obviously, I'll bring you back when we talk about faith in the marketplace and things to that nature for sure. But are there any words that you want to leave the audience with?
Yes. Well, first of all, I just want to say to you, Dr. Hardy, I've known you for some years now, and so I just honor and respect you, and I want to say that here. I hope that many people will watch your podcast, not only this series, but all of the rest to come, because you have a voice, and your voice is not what you say, your voice is what you've lived. You have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, I just want to
Don't make
say,
me start crying.
I will do it. No, you do have a voice. And so I want to say to anyone who's, watching this here, support, first of all, to support these podcasts when you see them and to share them. But also, too, you've got to, I just will say, make up in your mind what your why is, and don't let the what take you from your why. If something changes, a season change, and you're moving into a different direction, so be it. But don't let somebody who doesn't know you edit and try to proofread your identity. We just can't. I don't care if they come up and say, like people do, they're always trying to flatten my hair down. Oh, your hair is sticking up. I just go, okay. If they're coming trying to be a little passive aggressive. Oh, I like you. You're very articulate. I just go, like say something different, like really, just kind of throw them off. But the ultimate goal of life is this: we have to know what it is in life that we want to do. We paid the price. When you pay the price for it, nobody can take the price away. Now, if we can't do it in one setting, we'll just move on to the next setting. So I
Yes.
just want to say that.
Yes, and thank you. That was so articulate. you know, I'm like, you, and I really, that resonates with me because at the end of the day, um, I just want to show up. I want to do my part in society. I want to try to help, more people. And I always tell my students, don't say you're trying to help everybody, say they're helping. But I
Yes.
mean more of a help in a deposit way. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
remember those instructors, those professors that went out of their way to help me because I wasn't even up to regular reading levels. And I think that I felt an obligation to kind of get that back as well. And so I think, yeah, what you're talking about, I think you're mighty on many fronts, people, like I said, Dr. Hardy, or Dr. Tico, Sister Tico, then this is Dr. Mingo, Pastor Mingo, all the rest of the things, right? Like that's all of who we are. And the last thing I would leave somebody with, and I say this because I'm still working through this, in my case, I surrendered my identity because I thought it would actually help in the situations that I was in. And it didn't. It made it worse, and it took me longer to heal from it because not only did I surrender it, then it was surrendered, and nobody cared. And so I would say, hold on, show up as all of who you are, and in whatever way possible, ensure that people respects that.
Hmm.
And so now I have a friend that said everywhere they go is doctor. No, it's doctor. And at first I was like, yeah, I don't want to do all that. And then I learned why they did that. Because it was this place of you're gonna respect me, you're gonna respect what I've done, and then that's how we're gonna work. And so now I see that that was the plan for that. So anyway, thank you everybody. Before we hang up, I just literally want you to take a moment. MJ, tell us about your book, the culture. Where is it at?
The colors of culture.
Yeah, I was looking for it. I do have it on my bookshelf, just so y'all know. Tell them about that, and then tell them about just briefly about your TED Talk, and so kind of get them excited to go read the book and to listen to the TED Talk.
Sure. Thank you. So the book is titled The Colors of Culture, The Beauty of Diverse Friendships is the subtitle. And I wrote it from my experiences in Vietnam because I felt so devalued here in the U.S. And when I took off to kind of travel the world some years ago, I went to Ethiopia, to Kenya, to jungles, to the Middle East. And then I landed in Vietnam. I was trying to find myself and I'm so
Mm,
discouraged. So my book talks about all my travels around the world and how really what I was trying to find, I already had. And that's
mm,
my identity. And that Vietnam was instrumental in that. So it's just a book about how I messed up all along the way, didn't get it right, how I was a staunch racist, to be honest about it, because of my upbringing, but how I also realized that there's an South African term, Ubuntu. And Ubuntu means that I am because we are. And so many times people don't understand. They ignore the very gift that's in front of them because it doesn't look like them or whatever. So that's it. The TED Talk is called Shame Off You. If you type my name in and Shame Off You, and so that TED Talk is parody a little bit, but it talks about how I learned again about my identity through what I went through in life and how my journey of homelessness, um, sleeping in my car in a Walmart parking lot with a PhD, and all of my certificates and stuff packed in the back of my car, and I had nowhere to go, and how people judged me again as a doctor because of an abrupt situation that I went through, and how I learned that I'm not what I produce. I just am who I am, period.
period. And that is wonderful. I'm not going to even try to come behind that. I want to thank you for taking your time with us today to really talk about this broad level of experience. I often tell you, I know people talk about, oh, I'm global, but uh, don't see them actually traveling the globe, and I don't have a problem with that. But to know your background and to know that you take who you are from to a globe, across the globe, wherever you are, I think is amazing. And so
Yeah.
thank you to my audience, the listeners. We're working on it. We're going to get better, but I tell you what, these topics are going to get more rich and more rich. And what you're going to see is us showing up as our full self. And so
That's right.
thank you for all of those that support us. And those are who don't support us, try to get behind us. Just listen, seek to understand. You might actually learn something that you didn't know you can learn. So thank you, everybody. I'll talk with you soon. Bye, Dr. Mingo. Thank you.